Welcome to ipTalks. I'm Mel Toyne-Sewell, and today I'm joined by Martin Gouldstone, CEO of Oncimmune, a leading immunodiagnostics developer primarily focused on the growing fields of immuno-oncology, autoimmune disease, and infectious diseases. Glad to have you on ipTalks, Martin. Welcome. The company has seen a change at the leadership team and a complete change of strategy this year, so lots to talk about. But before we get to that and hear the story, why don't you tell us the sort of Oncimmune origin story and the technology it's based around?
Certainly. Thanks, Mel. And thanks very much for having me on the podcast today. Very excited about this. So basically, Oncimmune spun out from Nottingham University about 20 years ago. And the original premise of the business was on early cancer detection, which is a very notable and worthy cause. And the technology, the core technology that is based around came from an acquisition made about 5 years ago in Germany with Protogen, which is the Immuno-Insights platform. That's formed the basis of the early lung cancer detection products, which have been partnered with Freenome in California.
So before we talk about the new strategy, why don't we talk about you? And, you've had quite a busy career. You started out as a scientist and then went into recruitment, a bit of business development, a bit of corporate finance, and now you are a CEO. So just talk us through that particular journey.
Yes, quite tricky to talk you through the whole journey as it's about 30 years
Might
long,
take a while.
Sadly. But yeah, I started as a scientist working in genetics in the early days of genetic fingerprinting, really enjoyed that, joined the industry very early in clinical research and development, did that for several years, had a short stint as a recruiter, built a business, which taught me a lot about business and running a business, and then had several roles in early stage drug discovery platform businesses when high throughput proteomics genomics was a thing, when high throughput combinatorial chemistry was a thing, and in structural biology. I also worked in large-scale CROs, notably Quintiles and Syneos Health, and I've had 5 years in corporate finance M&A as a corporate finance advisor. So all of those things have given me I would call a very rounded commercial background. There aren't many deals that I have not done in the industry up to date. And so the CEO role at Oncimmune was attractive for several reasons. One was to apply all these skills and experiences I've learned, but also because I really was attracted to the platform itself. The platform is very solid technologically. There are very strong scientists in Germany driving that. And I like the idea of doing real data with real patients and applying that to medicine.
You officially, according to the RNS, you officially joined in August 2023, but these changes in the strategy and the structure of the company were kind of going on before then. So before we start talking about the strategy that you're taking forward, do you want to just give us a sort of quick potted history about what was the trigger for that event earlier in the year, and how did that set up for you for then taking it on as CEO?
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't a part of the company when the decision to sell off the early lung cancer detection business was taken. I think that it's gone to a very good home in Freenome in California. I think that the deal was at the time the best deal that could be done. And that deal has enabled us to take the business forward with a focus on the Immuno-Insights platform in Germany. And really, I see my role as maximizing the commercial and the scientific potential of that Immuno-Insights platform in Germany going forwards.
Actually, you recently put out a statement about that progress. What are the sort of outcomes you're looking for to demonstrate to your shareholders that you are making progress?
Obviously, proof is absolute, and commercial traction is one of those key bits of proof. So we released the strategy, I think, in early October. Clearly, I was working on that even before I joined Oncimmune, and have good alignment with the board on the strategy, and was given approval before we went nap on it publicly. What I think is happening is that we are showing or demonstrating commercial traction against that strategy with certainly the deals that we've announced most recently in the most recent RNS and going forwards. And I think what that's showing us is that the platform, the Immuno-Insights platform, autoantibody analysis day is coming. So I think in the early days of the technology, it was a nice to have, or seen as a nice to have by industry. But I think what I'm seeing, I've talked to over 30 customers since I joined back in August, and partners is that there's a growing awareness of this technology and the approach, and a growing awareness that this is we should do this rather than it's a nice to have. And I think what we're seeing in that are the results of that awareness change, certainly with the contracts that we've announced, and obviously what I think we have in the hopper going forwards.
Why is your technology so useful to the pharma companies you're working with? What does it do in very simple terms?
Yeah, in very simple terms, what it does is it measures the patient's immune system response to a drug, to a disease, to an intervention. And it does that in a way that can be tracked over time to indicate a change in response. So from the baseline when the patient enters a study before they're challenged with a drug or a disease, all the way through to conclusion. And what it does is it enables us to track that response and work out from the response what is going on in the body of the patient. This is really important for pharmaceutical companies in several ways. One is mode of action confirmation, confirming how your drug works. What is the hypothesis behind your drug working? And then the other would be around side effects, predicting or working out which patients might actually go on to develop key side effects. There are certain side effects associated in particular with the cancer drugs we work with, which are leading edge cancer drugs, and those relate to immune system response. So cytokine storms and hyperactivity of the immune system, being able to predict the patients that go on to get that is really important for the pharma companies for several reasons. One, those patients may actually be responders to your drug. And two, they need managing, and you need to predict which patients may go on to develop those side effects so you can manage them. So you get those patients staying in your study and they get a better response of the drug. The other areas are things like cardiotox, which are longer term side effect issues with certain drugs, checkpoint inhibitors. And again, it's really important to be able to predict which patients may go on to develop these side effects. We believe that our platform, and we have early data to show this, to support this, could be a very useful predictor of when these events may happen.
That's fantastic. I mean, but very much definitely in the sort of clinical research setting rather than, once a drug is launched, it's not going to be used by a doctor at a bedside to monitor immune response.
So I think that it's a fair point in that the majority of where the business has used this technology before is in the clinic with clinical research based companies, pharma companies. I do believe, though, that it could lead to the production of future prognostic diagnostics that could be transferred to a simple ELISA readout system or a COVID-type test strip system. So there is the possibility to convert it into something that could be productized. I also I know that this technology can also be applied further back in the drug discovery process and can be applied in drug discovery. And that's what really excites me. So that's one of the things that I've picked up on since I joined. And we have one of the deals I've mentioned that we've signed recently is actually exactly in that space. It's around confirmation of high throughput drug discovery approaches to nominate or to look for novel drug targets using high throughput proteomics, the study of proteins, high throughput NGS screens, which is genomics. And if you use our technology as an overlay, it provides an orthogonal biological validation of the results that you're seeing through the other areas. And what it could do is help you with your prioritization of novel drug target, disease target associations you're picking up through your larger screens.
There's a lot that you could do,
Yes.
But I suppose it's trying to kind of keep that focus down to what needs to be done now and then what can be done further along.
I completely agree. So focus is really key. And obviously we're a smallish company with a limited bandwidth and a limited capacity to follow through on things. But what I will say is that the autoimmune diseases, the things I've talked about are our bread and butter. They're what we do. So we'll continue to do those. But there is a growing focus of the business, and I'm focusing the new commercial team. So we've got a commercial team of 5 starting from January that we've built up in the period I've been here. And their focus is going to be increasing also on the newer modalities, on the drug discovery, on the adverse event prediction space. And we're seeing, as I said, early commercial traction on that already. And I think we will be focusing the commercial team towards that next year.
Given your breadth of experience, this is your first CEO job?
It is, yes.
So how are you finding that transition from being part of the team to now actually being the leader of it?
So that's really interesting. So my daughter, who I love very much, who's 25, sent me a really interesting article through LinkedIn about a letter to a first-time CEO of things you should look out for as a first-time CEO. So I think all of my background and experience has given me the tools to be a first-time CEO and to do well in the job. But one of the things she said which really stuck with me was how your demeanor is picked up on by your team. So if the CEO comes in with a long face and all miserable, everybody goes, oh, things are not going well. So you feel like you're on display all the time, and you are, to a degree, having to reinforce your messaging sort of through your body language, how you are. And that didn't really hit me until I first visited our facilities in Germany. And I came back from that quite tired after a fairly intensive period, and it made me realize that yes, that's actually true, but I believe that all of my background and experiences have prepared me for this role in a way that I think is helpful, but it gives me the chance to see it from the other side too. So I'm looking up at me as the CEO going, oh my God, don't say that, that looks ridiculous, or don't behave like that, that's just wrong. And I think that personally, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying the journey so far. It's a big challenge, as you can imagine, but it's actually super rewarding. And it's really interesting to see the way that you can affect strategy or affect a business through applying what you've learned and listening, really listening to your team, because they are the knowledge base, and working with them. And I think building a team, building a spirit, building a family feel is also incredibly rewarding.
This is your first CEO job, but you're not doing it quietly as a nice private company where you can kind of find your feet. You are doing it as a listed company CEO. So, you're not doing anything in private. Anything you do say will be taken down and held against you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a different dimension. I mean, I've been in public companies before. I've been an officer in public companies before. I've reported into public boards. So I'm aware of my responsibilities, very aware. And that's very true. You are aware of what you're saying, and you've got to be careful what you say. You can't share too much, and you have to be very fair across your investor base as well. So it's definitely another dimension or another part of the challenge, I would say.
So, Martin, you've talked about the challenges for you as a first-time CEO, and that listening is a really important part of it. Are there aspects that people need to be aware of before they sign on the dotted line to say, yes, I'll be a CEO? Are there any things to watch out for?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, from my direct experience, one is prioritization, and are you focusing on the right things? My crippling fear is that I am micromanaging people, or that I am delving too deeply into things. I mean, it's difficult because naturally I'm interested in the technology and the science. I have a science background, so I want to delve deeply into things. And then you suddenly catch yourself and go, hang on, is the person I'm talking to suddenly thinking, oh God, the CEO's drilling into me, what's going on? And that's part of it, is being that awareness of the impact you have on people, and particularly people in your organization that aren't your direct reports. You have to be aware that you ask them what to you is an innocent question. They may look at it and go, oh my God, what's going on? Why are they asking me this? So there's an element of that. I think the other thing that is true, and it's been said before, but it's absolutely true, is the loneliness of the CEO. So at the end of the day, you have your direct reports and your senior leadership team to confide in and work with. But at the end of the day, you can't confide everything in them. And there's an element of separation there. And also with your board, because your board are there to support you and give you advice. But they're also, they're looking for the business as a whole and looking out for the business as a whole. So who do you talk to? Who do you confide in? So I've been in the industry 30 odd years. I have a very broad network. I've got some very good friends in the industry that are very senior and have done what I've done. And you can, to a degree, I think, confide in them, but you can't if you're a public company. You can't confide in everything. And so what I would say, and this is something I need to sort for myself, is you need a senior mentor, somebody who is on the inside, who can give you advice, and who you can talk to as a peer about your concerns and issues that you can't necessarily share with your senior leadership team or even with your board. And I think that's really, really important. And that's something that I'm certainly looking into adding to my kind of network and my repertoire. But I would say that's really important.
Another point I was quite interested to ask about, because a lot of the work that we do is very much almost translating that sort of science story down into a business story.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of your investors are generalists.
Yeah.
And being a scientist, one always flees to the joy of the science and the elegance of it. But how are you finding telling that story, which a more generalist story that will resonate with people?
Yeah, it's something you have to be aware of constantly. And like you, I'm a scientist at heart. I love the science. I love the intricacies. I like the complexity. I'm drawn to it like a moth to a flame. But you're right. I mean, most of our investors are high net worths who just have a lay interest in the sector, a lay interest in the science. So being able to communicate that to them in a way that makes sense and is true is a challenge. And it's something that I do think about and work on myself. I love communicating. I love communication. I'm a part-time amateur dramaticist actor. So that's part of that kind of skill set. And I like to draw upon that when I need to in my communication with investors and with audiences.
You joined the company in August 2023, but to use a fairly colloquial expression, how did you get the gig? Have you always wanted to be the CEO? Did you have a path that was well planned? You knew where you were going to be in 10 years' time, or did it just land in your lap like serendipity?
It's a really good question. I think there's somewhere in between. The answer lies somewhere in between. So I've always wanted to have the chance to be a CEO. Like most people, I could do better than them, which is not always the case. But from an external perspective, I'm sure plenty of people listening to will go, yeah, I'm in that situation. I could do way better than them. I think I've spent 30 years in the industry. I know lots of people. I've networked a lot in that time. And I've worked with some really amazing people in the industry, very senior, amazing people in the industry. And I think that helped a lot. So there's an element of serendipity as to how I got this role. But I've worked with our chairman, Alistair MacDonald, who is the CEO of Syneos Health. I worked with him as a corporate financier when he put Syneos Health together, when we were assessing Inventive as an acquisition by INC. I then subsequently worked directly with him in Syneos. Equally, before that, I was kind of doing skunk works at Quintiles for Dennis Gillings directly through Mike Mortimer, who now runs GHO Capital. So it's really I think it's like a build-up of all the people you've known in your industry. And obviously, you haven't upset them in that time. And you've done good things with them and
which is
for
not
them.
always guaranteed.
Not always guaranteed. And sometimes people remember the people that have upset them for positive reasons. But it's an aggregation of those things, I think. So if somebody really wants to be a CEO and they don't have that killer idea that can be invested so that they can start a company, and several people do that successfully, I would say it's really around your networks, who you know, who you work with, and developing, in my view, a very broad skill set so that you can not just understand scientifically, but commercially, how people tick, how they're motivated, and definitely work in a commercial role at some point in your career, because understanding the commercials of a business, absolutely essential.
Actually, you often see that people become CEOs having done the CBO role, that sales role. Exactly. Yeah. But do you think that having that sales experience, that must help the networking side of it rather than coming from many other disciplines, I suppose? Do you think that's an advantage? I
think it's an advantage if you've got that science background first. So I spent many years in clinical research and development and basic genetics research. So I think having the marrying of those two skills is really important. And I think you're right. I think selling, you understand how people tick, what makes them be attracted to a technology or an approach. It does depend on what sort of business you're in, but the business that I'm in and where we are going, that background's essential, really.
In my experience, especially in this sector, I've also found that often the investors who come on board, possibly this is more the retail investors than the sort of high net worth and the institutionals, but there's almost an emotional reason for why they've invested, whether one of their family members has been affected by cancer or,
Yeah,
that's
there's
true. Often that
Yeah.
as well.
And you need to be aware of that. You
Yeah.
need to be cognizant of that and I would think respectful of that as well. So it almost makes you feel like you have a duty of care. To me, it does. And also I'm not alone. I'm not untouched by that. I was at a lunch today, memorial lunch today, for a friend that died of pancreatic cancer. I have absolutely as much involved and engaged in here as they do. So it's all about empathy and putting yourself in their place, isn't it? And there are elements of me that go in their place, so I can just pick on that and go, yeah, I get that completely. So
it might be quite easy for someone moving into a CEO role going, oh, excellent, I'm now in charge. But as much as you need to be able to make those decisions, it's also realizing that you are not the expert across everyone. That's what you have a team for, and that you select that team for the skills that they have.
And you need to be aware of that, and you need to, I think, someone with my breadth of background, I could easily dive in and do different bits. And the temptation to do that can be quite high. And making yourself rein back from that is quite tricky at times. Because you're right, these people have been hired for their skills and they know what they're doing.
How have you then gone on to identify the gaps and the type of people that you actually want to join you and be part of this team, this family that you're trying to create?
Yeah, this is a really good observation and a really good point. So I've been super lucky in two ways. At the same time I joined, we hired a new FD, Martin Hudson, who came originally from an automotive background. He is super strong and super good. And I'm really, really pleased to have him on the team. And we also have Ron, who was the head of legal and is now our COO and has that continuity of the business. He's been there 4 years, so he knows where everything's happening. Ron Kirshner. So I think from that perspective, we have a very complementary, strong leadership team. And then it's really listening to the people, as I said before. I mean, we have Petra Bruder and Hans Dieter in Germany, who have been the kind of co-scientific leads of the German operation for at least 10 years. And they bring a wealth of knowledge, information, and know-how to the piece that we would be very foolish not to listen to. So I feel blessed that we have a strong team. The commercial team is led by Mike Fisher, who's been with the company 7 years, very experienced guy, and we are building a very strong commercial team around him as well, which I have the luxury of helping select. So that's really helpful.
One of the facets you talked about as a CEO is that listening piece is obviously really, really important, and it is good as a CEO to listen to the team that you have around you. Are there any other bits of advice you might give to someone who is thinking of moving up the leadership line to CEO? Is there any other bits of advice? I know it's still early days, but from your observations, either before you became a CEO to now as a CEO.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm a scientist originally. I'd say I'm quite away from being a scientist now, though my mindset is particularly empirical. And I took the approach that I needed to learn absolutely everything I could about the business, from soup to nuts. So together with Martin, my FD, we really did turn the business upside down operationally and financially and scientifically. From my perspective, I needed to feel comfortable with the science. So what I would say to anybody coming into this role is really take the time to learn your people and learn your business from the ground up, every aspect of it, because only then can you really, particularly if your role is to rebuild or grow or develop, you can only then really do that from a position of strength and knowledge. So I would think that is the biggest piece of advice I could give.
And how long do you think that has taken you?
Well, I did start before I joined, in fairness. But I think redoing the whole strategy of the business from the ground up from the day one was a massive accelerator for learning the business well and getting to know the people well. And it was partly on purpose in that regard. So I would say a good couple of months to really learn the business. And obviously every business has a history. There were obviously people in roles before me, in leadership roles before me. So you do need to find out what's gone on before. And that is a bit of an ongoing exercise of discovery. But for the most part, I'd say it took me a couple of months to really get underneath it all and get into it.
You've given quite a recent progress report. What does 2024 look like? And obviously, if you've got that magic ball and can tell us what the market's going to be like, I'd be really grateful. But, but generally, what for Oncimmune, what are you looking forward to? What are the things that you're expecting to come through?
We've set the strategy. We will be reviewing the strategy regularly every quarter against how we're performing to see which aspects of the strategy are working and which are not, so we can rejig. What I would say is that key for the investors, from the ones I've spoken to and for myself, are developing actual proof points against that strategy. And those proof points have to be commercial in nature. So it's really signing the sorts of deals, the types of deals that I think we should focus on, and proving those proof points that the strategy is actually indeed correct and working, and there is commercial traction amongst that strategy. I think that's really key for next year.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for being very open and for your time. That's been fantastic. Thank you to everyone for listening to ipTalks.
Thank you, Mel, for inviting me.